So next, we're in for a real treat. We have a transformational discussion on how we as business leaders can rehumanize business by giving people their brains back. We are thrilled to have best-selling author and world-renowned business advisor Chuck Blakeman with us today. And you can be sure to check out his weekly Inc. magazine articles and his recent TED Talk on the emerging work world. Chuck's first book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, was rated #1 business book of the year, and his newest book, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea, has been named top 10 business book of the year and will be for sale in Chuck's afternoon workshop. Chuck started and built 10 businesses in 25 years around the US and internationally, and now uses his experience to help business owners and executives create success. His company, the Crankset Group, inspires and transforms your approach to business and your future. Chuck is a rare combination of successful business owner, speaker, and author who inspires leaders and provides simple tools to transform their business. I'd like to now introduce you to Chuck Blakeman.
Wow, we get music too. I like the dramatic entrance from nowhere. Isn't that cool? Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be with you guys today. It's special to be with the first Kintone conference. I'm really delighted to be part of this and be part of where this is going to go. Let's do stuff. All right, Peter Drucker. Anybody know who Peter Drucker is? Yeah, Peter Drucker, he died in the late 1990s, but he was one of the top management consultants of all time. And in the late 1990s, Peter Drucker said this: we're entering one of those times that comes around, one of those periods that comes around every few hundred years, where we don't understand the world anymore. And the past is not sufficient to explain the future. One of those rare periods. Tom Peters adds, if you're not confused, you're not paying attention. And I love what Jason said this morning. I told him I was going to steal this because toward the end of his talk, he said, I think it was, change is a core competency. And that's really part of what's going on here. We don't understand the world anymore. Change is a core competency, that adaptability, that ability to be agile. I'm not going to use the word agile a lot today because the things I'm going to talk about predate agile by a few hundred years. Agile is the latest version of the things we're going to talk about today. But I want to talk about the emerging work world and the participation age and where it's all going. And part of this is rehumanizing the workplace. So let's get into this. The question here is, isn't the workplace already human? Look at all the people here. Well, apparently not. Here's the data. It's pretty sad. Number one, the data says everything we're doing in the way of organizing our businesses is broken. So Jason talked about the products and the things that are coming along that we need to be adaptable to. And I'm going to talk to you about agile organizations, if you will, and how to design an organization in a way that will actually help you become adaptable. We were just hired by Google to help them figure out how to work with their organizational design team to talk more about how they can become more agile and become more adaptive as an organization, because we all know that change is now a core competency. The reality of it is, guys, is that it's all broken. Here's the data. 51%, well, we'll start with this. 32% of the people at work are engaged. We've all heard this one before. 70% basically are phoning it in. 7 out of 10 are just coming for 8 hours and putting in time. But it gets worse. 51% of the people there are actually looking for a new job right now. You can go out on Gallup and see these statistics on Harris and on Gallup. Gallup does this every month. And right now on Gallup, 51% of everyone in America has their resume out. Actively looking for a job with their resume out, 51%. And Harris says 86% of the people at work would rather be doing something else. Only 14% have found what they think is something they'd like to do for a long period of time. Does this sound good? You know, if you had a piece of software that was working at 32% efficiency, would you just say, well, you know, what are you going to do? Everybody else has the same problem. No, you'd work on it. You'd figure it out. If you had a machine that was working at 32%, what would you do? You'd oil it. You'd take it apart. You'd put it back together. You'd figure out what's wrong with it. You'd hug it. You'd do whatever you have to make it work because it's expensive to get a new machine. But if you couldn't get it done, then you'd get a new machine. But we're putting up with 32% engagement in the workplace around us. And that's leading to some amazingly sad data when it comes to productivity and lost revenue, lost dollars in the way we're doing things. It's broken, and we know it. That's the second message here. We intuitively know it's broken. Look at this statement. This was a survey done by Global Human Trends, Capital Trends in 2016, and they said that after 3 years of struggling to improve leadership and build a meaningful culture, executives see a need to redesign the organization itself. The way we organize work is fundamentally broken, and we'll talk about that. 92% of the survey participants rated this as a critical priority. We got to do something different. And they said, whatever it looks like, it's going to be a new organization built around highly empowered teams, driven by a new model. We think that that's the future of work. We believe the emerging work world is going back where it came from. I'm going to talk to you about some things here that are going to sound very progressive or radical or futuristic and that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is, what we're going to be doing over the next 10 to 20 years at work is going back to where we were before the industrial age, where people were self-managed and they all came to work as adults and they didn't have to be supervised. So the question is, we know it's broken. We intuitively, the data says it's broken. We know it's broken. And the question is, are we going to fix it? Here's a great example of what the problem is in in a poetic little nutshell. I saw this blog post in, I think it was in around 2003, in the early days of blogging. And it was some guy in a technology company. This wasn't a kid in a factory. This was like a 23 or 24-year-old guy in a technology company. And I read this blog post, and it was riveting to me. And it actually got me to the point where I wrote this second book, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. Because we organized our companies this way in the past, and I said, we can't keep this going. And the post went something like this. It's pretty simple. I memorized it almost in the first reading. Every day when I come to work, I park my car in the parking lot, and I leave myself in the car, and I go into work. And at noon, I always try to come out and reunite with myself for a few minutes before I have to leave myself in the car again and go back into work. I do this every day. And at the end of the day, I always hope to get out in time to reunite with myself before I'm gone. What does this tell you? What does this sound like to you? What are you hearing from this guy? Shout it out. Desperation. Schizophrenia. There's two of him. Insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again. What have they taught him? What's the message? Inauthenticity. Yeah, what part of him is he leaving in the car? The true self, yeah. The best of him. The part that would make that company great. And we don't have time for this today, but I've studied this stuff all the way back through the Middle Ages, and this comes from the concept of the industrial age, where people became extensions of machines, and it was actually not helpful to have the entire human being show up. We just want the part of you that runs the machine. The rest of you, please leave that in the car. That's the messy part, the human part. We don't need that. We need you to be as much as like the machine as possible. If you reflect the machine, the more you reflect the machine, the better off we are as a company. And this is 2003 in a technology company. This is not a factory. And I think the message here is that there's something fundamentally broken in this whole approach. What he's identifying is that he's living at the intersection of two opposing work worlds. We call it the industrial age. And that's this thing that I believe is still strangely dominant. When I talk about industrial age companies today, I believe it's 95% of companies that are out there today. The front office looks pretty much like it did when we started. And the participation age is the emerging work world. And it's the new standard for how we work. It's an awkward pass-off. We're not doing this well yet. We're getting there, but it's awkward. For instance, in the production areas, we've replaced industrial age assembly lines and smokestacks and that kind of stuff with nanotechnology and clean rooms and that kind of stuff. But the front office looks pretty much like it did 100 years ago, with guys in ties making decisions for everybody else and telling them to please leave the rest of you in the car. That describes most companies today. So the back office, the production area, had left the industrial age in the 70s, but the front office still looks like it did in 1910. And it's a very awkward pass-off because the emerging participation age people do not want to make money, they want to make meaning. So here's the two hallmarks of the participation age. I didn't make this term up. One of my companies, we were accepting an award at Sun Microsystems about 2005 or something like that for their branding or marketing partner of the year. Very nice honor. And I heard a futurist from Wired magazine talk about the participation age. And I thought this was an umbrella that really encompassed everything that talked about where we're going. And then presidential candidates used it as well. The participation age has two hallmarks: participation and sharing. Companies are figuring out that if they invite everyone to participate in the building of a great company and then share in the rewards, and that's the key part, that both the company and the people profit more, both financially and in every other way. There's something else happening that's also creating workplaces with a soul. This emerging work world is creating places where work actually happens, where you bring the whole human being with you. And this isn't woo-woo crap, guys. This is hardcore success strategy. This isn't HR's feely stuff. There's so much data out there that says when you allow and require people to bring the whole messy, creative person to work, everybody's better off. I believe in the emerging work world, what we're seeing in the data and in the companies that are highly successful, that the people who embrace this concept of the participation age are going to thrive, and those that don't will be left behind. Something else is also emerging, or really re-emerging, from pre-industrial age, and that is that people actually want to make meaning. That we don't have employees anymore, we have stakeholders. That's why employees are a bad idea. We need stakeholders or associates or members or something else. The history of the word employee is not, you can't bring it back. It had a bad start, and it's never been a good idea. The difference here is that this is not a millennial thing. People look at this and say, oh, those millennials, you guys want to make meaning. Get over yourselves. No, that's not the issue. The research shows that every one of us, from baby boomers on down, we all want to make meaning. The difference is this, that boomers like me were taught by the industrial age to shut up, sit down, don't make waves, live invisibly, and go out quietly with a gold watch. And that doesn't sound attractive anymore, because to millennials and people who were born post-industrial age or grew up in the work world post-industrial age, they're not going to put up with this anymore because they didn't grow up in the shadow of the industrial age, and they don't want a job stripped of its humanity. It's not that they don't want work. They actually want work. That's what we found. We have a lot of millennials working for us, and they want work, but they don't want a job. And here's the difference. A job pays the bills. Work is meaningful. And people want meaningful work. In the participation age, people are going to work because they can make meaning, not just money. It's one of the biggest failings in business today is we're still trying to incentivize people by paying them more money. Here's the mantra. People will leave if you do not pay them enough. They will not stay if you overpay them. And you have a lousy culture, and there's no meaning. So they'll leave for money, but they won't stay for it. They'll stay for the meaning. It's okay if you overpay them, by the way. We do that too. The question here is it possible that this kind of stuff could work better for both the company and the people who work there? That's the question. Well, here's a bunch of companies that are racing madly in this direction. Self-managed companies in many cases, in most cases up here, these are companies that don't have managers. Nobody here can fire anybody. They all work in self-managed teams. A lot of them are racing in that direction, and all of them are embracing the concepts of the participation age. And there's a lot more. We've identified about 100 very large companies and thousands of smaller ones that are looking at this and saying, this is what we need to be doing. This is human. People come up to me after these talks and they say, what you said just made so much sense. And it's because it's built into the way we run as human beings. This is the operating system that we should have behind us in work, in the way we organize work. Here's some reasons why these companies and many more are chasing this direction. And it's one of the core issues with the industrial age that we still carry with us today that causes that guy to leave himself in the car. There's all these reporters' questions, right? Who, what, when, where, how, and why, and all that stuff. Which one of these is the most human of questions? The one an animal would be the least likely to ask. Why? Yeah, why is the most human of questions? What's the one question you've not been allowed to ask at work for the last 150 years? Why? If you ask why, you're a rebel, you're an outcast, you're a misfit. You're rebelling against authority. Don't ask why, because I told you so, that's why. Because I went to dental school and you didn't. That's why. It's dehumanizing. See, when we strip people of why and all the other questions, it strips us of our humanity. The creative process is basically a series of asking questions. How you get to work is a creative process. Should I go left, right, straight, follow Waze? Here's another app. How do I get to work? That's a creative process. When Michelangelo famously, whether it's apocryphal or real, he saw this block of marble in the chapel or in the cathedral yard in Florence, giant block of marble, and he says, the way I figured out how to work with that thing is I walked around it, and I asked myself, what's in there? And he decided David was in there, and he said, and all he did was chip away everything that wasn't David. That's a creative process, but that's who we are as human beings. Creativity is not about making statues or paintings. It's about how you get to work. It's how you build an app. It's the ability to make questions. It's the most human thing you can do at work is ask questions and make decisions. And those two things have been taken away from us in the industrial age. Fortunately, that stuff is changing. And very quickly, as the emergent participation age comes around, the concept of managers who embrace control and authority and command and all that stuff, they're disappearing in favor of exponentially fewer leaders who embrace participation and sharing. What you're finding is that we can replace a lot of managers with very few leaders because people are self-managed. And employees are being replaced. Employees are those people who are treated like children. They're herded into office daycare centers and supervised like children. That's being replaced with stakeholders who are self-motivated adults who are able to make their own decisions, and they don't need to be managed. They need to be led. This is one of the big failings of modern consulting. I've built 10 companies, and so I don't like consultants, even though that's what we do right now. But I get the game, and the problem is that they've conflated management and leadership to the point where we don't even know what the difference is. If I had everybody in this room write down, give me a definition of management, give me a definition of leadership, it would be so fuzzy and there would be so much variance in that we wouldn't have any consensus at all. And yet they're radically, radically different things. So what's the difference? Let's start with employees versus stakeholders, and then we'll do managers versus leaders. What's the difference between an employee and a stakeholder? Radically different things. An employee is that person like that kid who left himself in the car. They only bring the part of them to work that is an extension of a machine. Stakeholders bring the whole, messy, creative person to work. And that's the person that will make your company blow up. When you allow and require them to bring everything instead of just the part that runs the machine. Secondly, employees do what they're told. Stakeholders question everything. In an industrial age type company, and again, 95% of companies I think are still industrial age, in those companies, we consider these people annoying. Stop asking questions because I told you so. But in a participation age company, that's who you look for. And if they're not doing that, you require these people to start doing that. You have to start asking questions. It's not optional. The third attribute is that employees need to be managed and stakeholders only need to be led. So let's look at the difference between management and leadership. This afternoon I'll give my two definitions of those things and you'll see how radically different they are. We've done a lot of work on this stuff. Managers, the number one attribute of a manager is that they solve and decide. We're working with a very large technology company right now and they said the number one problem in our company is that for the last 15 years we've promoted people specifically because they were good solvers and deciders, and we put them in positions where they now solve and decide for everybody else. And it has paralyzed the organization. 75,000 people. Managers solve and decide. Leaders do something very different. They train others to solve and decide, and then they get out of the way. Managers never get out of the way. That's why Dilbert's so funny. Dilbert should not be funny. We shouldn't get it. You should read Dilbert and say, I don't understand this. We really get it, don't we? Yeah, there's a problem there. Leaders train others to solve problems, and they delegate decision-making. Decisions are made where they have to be carried out whenever possible. That's a principle of the participation age. Why am I making decisions for somebody else? I can give you so many examples of where we and companies we work with relinquished decision-making to the levels at which it actually should be made, and things happen so much better in so many ways. Here's a mantra for you. Here's something you should memorize when it comes to this concept of making decisions versus telling. Here's another way to say this. Managers tell, leaders ask. If you're telling, you're not leading. I might have a slide here later. I might have it this afternoon. Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter and Square, he says, when I am making decisions, I am not leading. He's got it figured out. He's managing. Here's the mantra. The art of leadership is to know how few decisions the leader needs to make. The art of leadership is to know how few decisions the leader needs to make. When I'm making decisions, I'm not leading. Here's the next attribute of manager versus leader. Managers focus on process, how something gets done. Did you make all your phone calls? Did you run yourself through the right process? How things get done. Leaders focus on results. If you get this result, I don't care how you got it, as long as it's legal, moral, and ethical. You come up with a process. That gives me my brain back. Let's agree together on a result, and then you guys figure out how to get there. And I'll coach you, I'll mentor you, I'll guide you, I'll support you, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask hard questions. The last attribute of the difference between these two is really important. Managers focus on tasks. They delegate tasks. And the problem with this, guys, this is an industrial age problem. When you delegate tasks, people feel used. Put this nut on that bolt. There's no brain activity involved in that, or very little. There's no humanity in that. I don't get to ask questions and answer them. Just do what you're told. Delegate tasks. When you delegate tasks, people feel used. Leaders do something very different. They delegate responsibility. When you delegate responsibility, that creates ownership, and ownership will make you take care of your own. Well, you get the idea. Wouldn't you like to have everybody just taking care of their own crap? Yeah, I'd like to have a dog like that, frankly. But it's different. If you tell me what to do and you just give me tasks, I'm going to feel used. Give me responsibility. Give me ownership. Give me a result to get to. Put the ball in the goal. And then let's figure out how to do that together. That creates ownership. And ownership is the most powerful motivator in business. Stop trying to get people engaged. Stop hiring people to create engagement. Engagement is not a process. It's a result. Let's give people their brains back, and they will be 100% engaged. You should have a company, not 32% engaged. Your company should be 100% engaged. There's no reason why it shouldn't. And we can show you companies with 200, 500, 50,000 people where everybody's engaged. And the ones who aren't, they either get engaged or they find themselves somewhere else. So here's an example of one of those companies. One of my favorite examples because they break all the rules. They're a manufacturing company. They're in Brazil in one of the worst political and economic climates. They have incredible union problems. You think there's regulations in California, you should visit Brazil. It's suffocating. This guy, Ricardo Semler, built this company, and he built it on two fundamental principles. This is another thing that differentiates leaders from managers. We can't go through all of it this morning. We'll do some of it this afternoon. But managers focus on policy. Leaders focus on principle. Managers manage by policy. Leaders lead by principle. He threw out all of the policy manuals, and Ricardo decided we're going to run this company on two principles. Number one, trust in adult behavior. And number two was everybody has their own work rhythms. As a result, they have one of their businesses is making washing machines, and they decided that we weren't going to have hours anymore for our factories. I mean, how bizarre is that? They hired somebody, and they'd ask the guy, well, when do you want to come to work? What do you mean, when do I want to come to work? This is a factory, right? You tell me when I come to work. No. When is your best work rhythm? Anybody here do design work? My son's a graphic designer. When's the best time to do design work? Yeah, 2 a.m., yeah. Whenever the muse hits you or that kind of, but it's not from 8 to 5 on a regular basis. And that's what they figured out in their washing machine factory. They make better washing machines at higher productivity, higher revenue than anybody else in South America because they've given people their brains back. Here's structural changes they made in their business over about an 8-year period. He took 12 layers of management in this organization and reduced it to 3 circles of leadership. There are no titles or management ladder. He destroyed all of that, and he said, nobody's ever going to get promoted here again. We have that in our company as well. When we hire someone, they come in as a chief. Everybody in our company is a chief. We got a chief relationship officer, a chief transformation officer, a chief results officer, a chief connecting officer, a chief hospitality officer. Everybody comes in at the top. There's no promotions. You want to make more money? Make a bigger impact. Take on more responsibility, save us money, make us money, and we've had people get a raise once a month for 13 months in a row and triple their income. You couldn't get that in a traditional environment where you're going to get maybe a 2.3% increase at my discretion, no matter how hard you work. He destroyed all that stuff and said, you deserve a raise, now go find it. Self-organized, self-managed teams. Rather than having managers, over time they developed into a place where everybody managed themselves. This is not chaos and this is not anarchy. We're going to talk about this afternoon. This is Agile, but again, it's way older than Agile. It's more organized. It's more metric-driven. There are more clear lines of responsibility. All of that's there, but I get to have my brain back. Decisions are made where they have to be carried out. No set work hours. We talked about that one. Here's an interesting one. At Semco, all meetings are optional. Imagine how many useless meetings would go away if we made that rule in our companies. Why do people go to meetings? You have to. Yeah. Who organized the meeting? The boss. And what does the boss have that makes you go? He has a gun. I can fire you. You don't come to my meeting? I'm going to fire you. What if you took the gun away and said, let's see who's leading rather than managing? Because see, managers have reports, leaders have followers. And if you call a meeting and nobody shows up, guess what? You only have reports. That's a problem. That's what they did here, and they found out who was leading and who wasn't, and they shuffled the thing around and figured out how to make this actually work. Unlimited vacation. Hey, you're an adult. Figure it out. What they found out, as we found out in America, is every time you give people unlimited vacation, they stop taking vacation. Because they start acting like owners, and I've owned 10 businesses, and it's never done. You know, you quit on Friday, it was going to be there Monday morning, so you work through the weekend. So we have to retrain people. We actually give a vacation fund in our business, because Krista Valentine, who's down here in the front, I'll call her out, she's the one who made us do this, because unlimited vacation made her work all the time. So now we have a vacation fund, and you have to turn in receipts and show that you actually went on vacation, and then your team gets to vote on whether you went on vacation, and if you didn't, if they don't think you went on vacation, you don't get your $1,500, you have to try again. Thanks, Krista. Profit sharing for everyone. See, this is the other piece that we miss on. With this engagement stuff, what's engagement all really about? It's about, could you please work harder so I can run off with more money? Now, you know, we don't articulate that, and maybe they don't articulate it, but they get it. And that's one of the biggest reasons that engagement doesn't work. The second tenet of the participation is or sharing. It's not necessarily always profit. It can be other things. But that second tenet is built on the fundamentals of capitalism. When you turn everybody in the company into a capitalist, they decide to ante up and they get more involved. We're just hiring somebody in the Philippines today or tomorrow, and we've designed a profit and incentives-based environment for them they've never seen before, and they're all excited about getting just being a capitalist, and they're going to be doing administrative work and other things like that for us on an incentive basis. The other thing they've done here is that at Semco they question everything 3 times. It's a rule. It's one of the very few rules. Not only do you not get to ask why, you have to ask why at least 3 times for every decision you're going to make. Minimum. It's built into the structure. Just the opposite. These are stakeholders. So this is interesting. Ricardo Semler said, I didn't build this company to get the liberty from the freedom from the time clock and and the bureaucracy and all that stuff, even though they did. He said this, and this is going to sound like a bunch of nonsense. He said this, I built this company with 3,000 people, a $2 billion company. I built this company for one reason only, so that everybody who works here could find their own personal destiny. What a load of woo-woo crap, right? Are you kidding me? So how does this focus on humanity and figuring out how can I help you and you and you find your own personal destiny? How does that work out for them in the hardcore bottom line capitalistic stuff? Well, in the worst recession in the worst 10-year recession in Brazil's history, revenues grew by 600%, profits went up by 500%, the productivity rose by 700%. And here's the kicker: year after year for the last 35 years, their turnover is less than 2%. They got 3,000 people, and they got 35 or 40 people who leave every year. You want to talk about something that will make you profitable? One of the biggest financial burdens on companies is retraining. Somewhere between 50% and 8 times of the salary of the person who just left. That's what it's going to cost you because they left. They don't have anybody leaving. This stuff works. Here's I love this statement by Ricardo Semler, sort of encapsulates how they believe in adulthood. And this doesn't just go with their salespeople. This is across the organization. But he says, we don't want to see your expense report, how many holidays you're taking, or even where you work. Let's all agree you'll sell 57 widgets per week. If you sell them by Wednesday, please go to the beach and start again on Monday. If you had we were in line yesterday. Krista could attest to this. We were in line to get on the airport yesterday, or to get on the plane. And some woman behind us was talking about her job. And we just very casually gave her just 2 or 3 sentences about, we believe in adulthood, and if you're done, go home. And she said, can I have your business card? We don't have to go find people. They come find us. At Semco, there's 300 plus people a week putting in their applications, and they're not looking. Great companies will have people running toward them. Again, a lot of companies just remember Semco's not alone. That's just one example. W.L. Gore, they make Gore-Tex. Yeah, I'm a big bicycler. Everything I wear is Gore-Tex. I found out early on that spandex is a privilege, not a right, but I still wear it. And 10,000 people there, not a manager. Nobody manages anybody. And we'll talk about them a little bit this afternoon as well. They've been doing this since 1958, guys. This is not new stuff. They built a large corporation around this. All right, a little bit more data. I got in a Twitter argument with Tom Peters 6 or 8 months ago. I use some political terminology here and say, well, he started it. But he tweeted me, and somebody had given him my book and maybe one of my Inc. articles on self-management, and he tweeted, please let me know if there's ever an airplane built by self-management. I'm not getting on. And I love it because what happens in these conversations I have is people come at me with emotion, because we have 150, 200 years of tradition of top-down hierarchies that we have to work with. And there's a lot of command and control, ego, and all sorts of other things in that, and a lot of emotion. So he gave me an emotional statement, and I respond with data. Tom, the GE Aviation division of General Electric, this huge top-down company, is entirely flat. There's no managers. It's a self-managed division. They make engines for most of the planes in the world. You're going to have to take the bus from now on. And we went back and forth for a few months, and he would give me emotion, and I'd give him data. Here's some more data. 10 years, most companies in the S&P 500 grow about 12% a year, 122% over 10 years. Jim Collins is Good to Great companies in his book, 4 times the average, or three times the average, 316. Raj Sisodia wrote a book on participation age companies where they focus on making meaning, and that they ask the question, is there something bigger than just making money that you guys are all about? And he found, I think it was 26 companies out of the Fortune 500, 27 somewhere in there, that raised their hands and said, if you invest with us, you have to understand you are our second priority as a stakeholder or as a shareholder, not your first. Our first is to make meaning of some sort. And then he did the data on how they perform. Over the same 10-year period, they grew 1,000%, 4 times faster than Jim Collins's Good to Greats and 10 times faster than the average. You want to make more money, rehumanize your workplace, give everybody their brain back. Here's John Cotter from Harvard, 10-year study, fantastic statistics here, revenue growth of companies that focus on people rather than production is 682% versus 166. Stock price for those who focus on people, 900% versus those that don't. And look at this one. Over that 10-year period, these guys, their profits grew by 756%, and the other guys stayed relatively the same. Want to make more money, rehumanize your workplace. We'll talk more about this afternoon, but we'll give this out as a card this afternoon in our workshop. Here's a side-by-side T-chart on the difference between factory system and participation age. Here's the model. We've all seen it before. Why do these people at the bottom exist? To serve the guys at the top. Yeah. Here's the participation age model. Self-managed teams, these are stakeholder leaders. In the participation age, everyone leads. We'll talk this afternoon about a submarine captain who turned the worst submarine into the best submarine in the Navy in 1 year with the same 134 people who had made it the worst. And what he did was he made them all into leaders. There's no followers on this boat anymore. And then you have floating stakeholder leaders that used to be vice presidents and directors and managers going around saying weird things like, how can I help you? What support do you need? Do you need training? Do you need to connect with someone? What can we do to make you more successful? What are your goals? Here it is on a micro basis. People wonder, how does this self-management stuff work on a micro basis? One of the biggest problems in business is right there at the top. The book was originally written, titled, Why Managers Are Always a Bad Idea. And there's a problem with this because I think it was Harris again, it might have been, no, it was Work Survey, or Survey.com did a survey about 5 years ago before I wrote my book, and they were asking, why do people quit? And they found that there were 20 major reasons. 15 of the 20 were directly related to their manager. Get rid of managers, you get rid of 75% of the reasons people will leave your company. But it's not fair to the manager. The problem is that we've asked managers to do too much. Managers are like God. They've got 7 or 8 people reporting to them, and they have to be relational and task-driven and detail-oriented and visionary and all these opposite things we're asking of one person. It's an impossible job. In a self-managed team, they manage themselves. They take the things that actually were being helpful by the manager, and we turn those into self-managed. We give those to the people themselves to work with. This guy's good at training. That guy's good at going to the meeting. He's silver-tongued. This guy's good at data. This guy's good. Let's divide it up amongst the people who are really good at that. Decisions are made at the level they have to be carried out, and we've rehumanized the workplace. So this is a simplified example of how this stuff works in companies like Gore, where there's 3,000 people. Here's a simple illustration of a company that was at $9 million before and $28 million after they changed over. They were stuck at $9 million as a law firm. They're stuck at $9 million for 18 years, couldn't get past it, and now they're blowing up. Little tiny company. I give the little tiny ones because this is so impactful at every level. There's no size where self-management doesn't work. Little tiny company with 2.5 people in it, and she decided to actually leave. This business is in Washington, D.C. She followed her husband to Denver to follow his job, and I convinced her to keep the company open and trust those people to run it and show them how. And today I think it's around $4.5 million company, and she still lives in Denver, and the company's in D.C. She owns the company, and she lives in Denver. And she has started, against my advice, she started 2 more businesses in Washington, D.C. While she lives in Denver. So these are just some examples. We're going to talk more about this again this afternoon as well, but this is the simplicity of self-management. In 1967, Bill Gore wrote this paper based on how they were running W.L. Gore. And it's called the Lattice Organization. You can find it on the internet. It's like 15 pages long, and each page has like 100 words on it. I can actually get through it. Attributes of the organization is very simple. This is it. If Bob, up in the upper left-hand corner, wants something from Fred, Bob goes to Fred and gets what he needs. Now, in a managed company, what's in the middle of that line? What's that? The manager. Yeah, actually multiple managers on multiple inboxes because you got fiefdoms all over the place. Everybody's protecting their turf, and so this guy has talked. So this, it's like that phone game. By the time it gets to Bob, has no idea what it's actually supposed to be anymore. Elon Musk knows this. I wrote an Inc. article last week on this. I'll just read this very quickly. This is the worst thing in business. Never read your slides. Well, I'm going to read my slides because this is a tremendous example of the Lattice Organization. He intuitively knows that the way they're organized at Tesla is broken. There are two schools of thought about how information should flow. By far, the most common way is chain of command, top-down hierarchy, which means you always flow communication through your manager. The problem is this enhances the power of the manager but fails to serve the company. To solve a problem quickly, two people in different departments should simply talk and make the right thing happen. Instead, people are forced to talk to the manager who talks to their manager, who talks to the manager in the other department, who talks to someone else on the team. Then the info has to flow back the other way. This is incredibly dumb. Any manager who allows this to happen at Tesla, let alone encourages it, will soon find themselves working at another company, no kidding. Anyone at Tesla can and should email talk to anyone else if they think it is the fastest way to solve a problem for the benefit of the whole company. You can talk to your manager's manager without his permission. You can talk directly to a VP. You can talk to me. You can talk to anyone you want. Moreover, you should consider your obligation to do this until the right thing happens. The point here is not random chit-chat, but rather ensuring that we execute ultra-fast and well. We cannot compete with the big car companies in size, so we must do so with intelligence and agility. There's that change thing again. One final point he made in his email, managers should work hard to ensure they are not creating silos within the company that create an us versus them mentality. I've never been in a company with silos, have you? This is unfortunately a natural tendency and needs to be actively fought. How can it possibly help Tesla if departments erect barriers between themselves? We are all in the same boat. Always view yourself as working for the good of the company, not your department. Thanks, Elon. He gets this stuff. Why don't we do it? Bill Gore, right back from 1967. Here's why even Tesla isn't doing it yet. The simplicity and order of an authoritarian organization makes it an almost irresistible temptation. Isn't it easier just to tell people because I told you so? Because I'm in charge? But if you do that, you end up with people leaving their brains in the car. It's counter to the principles of individual freedom and smothers the creative growth of man. So let me give you this, close to closing. Who's in charge here? Don't torture this. The rep? No, he's not in the picture. Everyone is in charge, but who's in charge right now? It's the guy with the ball. Yeah, everybody has the opportunity to be in charge. Who's in charge here? Whoever gets to the ball first. That's leadership. That's leader-leader. It's no longer manager-follower. It's leader-leader. If I see something in the company that needs to happen, I go and grab it. And if I set up a meeting and people come, I'm the leader of that particular project until they find that I'm no longer useful. The art of leadership is to know how few decisions the leader needs to make. And here's Jack Dorsey again. When I'm making decisions, I am not leading. We'll get into these principles of the participation age this afternoon: directives versus direction, trust versus mistrust, LCD versus HCD, and then we're going to talk about some practices. Tell versus ask, policies versus principles. We'll get through all this stuff this afternoon. And then again this afternoon, we're going to go through these things. Here's some tools. This stuff works on a practical, tactical basis, and here's some simple tools that you can put in place that put people in a position where they no longer need to be managed. They've got the tools to manage themselves. All right. I'll finish with this. Here's some myths about the participation age. You can't measure it. No, there's actually more metrics. No, there is really a lot of leadership. No, it's in every industry. It is better. All the productivity, all the data is on the self-managed side of the world. And no, we're not winging it. It's actually more process-driven. It's not chaos and anarchy. It is much more organized. And it's not a fad. It's been around for a long time, and it predates the industrial age. It's not size-specific. It's not about no management. It's not like there's no management. It's just self-management. The teams manage themselves. They take over those responsibilities. And last, it's not a left-wing conspiracy because we're turning everyone into a capitalist. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about all of these things in detail and figure out how do we become better leaders, how do we rehumanize the workplace, how do we replace employees with stakeholders. And I'll just remind you that we don't want people leaving their brains in the car. Please come join us in the participation age. Thanks. I think we got room for a few questions.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So to begin, stakeholders are a great idea, but aren't they hard to find?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that this afternoon. Our statistic, our data is that 81% of the people in the workplace want to or will be, if you require them, they will become stakeholders. But only 20+% are right now, and that's our fault. Managers make people stupid and lazy. They're not. Leaders make them smart and motivated. It's where we put the bar and what we decide we want of people. You design an organization based on this assumption or that one, and both of them are self-fulfilling prophecies. And again, if W.L. Gore can have 10,000 of these people, and DaVita can have 65,000 of them, and how many do you need? You can find them. They're out there. They're everywhere. And 80+% of the people who are working with you right now will go there. Again, David Marquette with the submarine. He took the same 134 people who had made it the worst submarine in the Navy and turned it into the best. And he didn't change out anybody. Guess who the problem was? Wasn't them. So they're everywhere. Stakeholders are everywhere. They will do it. Many will do it because they are allowed to, and many will do it because they're required. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets to grow up.
Continuing on that point, what is the most powerful motivator for a stakeholder?
The most powerful motivator for a stakeholder, I think Daniel Pink has a lot of it, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, but I also think capitalism is in there. I think he misses on that, and we don't have time for that today. But it is about making meaning first. That I leave work at the end of the day, and I say, this was worth doing. And I have relationships. That's the second piece of this. Great teams, good teams function around task, or teams organize around task. Community organizes around relationships, and the companies that do the best are organized around relationships. So I love the people I work with. I have community, not just team.
All right. And the last one we have time for is, how can a company move from a linear hierarchical structure to one with self-managed teams?
Yeah, it's somewhere between a 6-month and a 2-year process with help, and it starts with the people in the leadership deciding that everybody there has the opportunity to be an adult, like Ricardo Semler said, trust in adult behavior. Do we really do that? And then is our entire organization built around trusting in adult behavior? It's so counter-logical, but it is actually very intuitive. You know, if you remove all the rules, the inmates are going to run the asylum, right? No. The inmates are going to grow up, and they're going to take things on. They're going to take this in places you would have never imagined it could go. So the first thing is, I got to change my mindset, because it's my mindset that made this happen. Think of the Navy captain before David Marquette and then David Marquette. That's the first thing. And then there's a lot of tools and ways to do this. Don't go back and tell everybody they're a shareholder or a stakeholder, I'll be on the golf course. That's not the way to do this. It's like Agile. You do it in the smallest place possible with the minimum viable product, with the people who love you the most first, and then put it out to your whole organization.
Thank you very much, Chuck.
Thank you so much. Let's get involved in the participation age. Thanks.